The worst kind of regret isn't losing someone you love, it's realizing it when it's already too late. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers washed over the dining room of the Monarch, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. Conversations drifted through the air like quiet music, blending with the faint clink of silverware against fine china. At a corner table near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fifth Avenue, Ethan Blackwood leaned back in his chair, half listening as Sophia Lane animatedly described a luxury vacation she wanted them to take that summer. Ethan nodded occasionally, offering polite smiles, but his attention was elsewhere. The 38-year-old billionaire had spent years building an empire, acquiring companies, and becoming the kind of man whose name appeared regularly in business magazines. Yet tonight, despite the expensive wine, the five-star service, and the beautiful woman sitting across from him, he felt strangely empty. Then everything changed. The restaurant doors opened. Ethan barely glanced up at first. New guests arrived every few minutes. But something made him look again. And when he did, the world seemed to stop moving. A woman stepped inside, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear as she paused near the hostess stand. For a second, Ethan forgot how to breathe. Olivia Carter. 7 years disappeared in an instant. The laughter around him faded. The music vanished. All he could see was her. Olivia looked older now, more confident, carrying herself with a quiet grace he didn't remember. Yet it was unmistakably her. The woman he had once imagined spending his entire life with. The woman he had walked away from. Ethan's fingers tightened around his glass. His pulse pounded so hard he could hear it. Then his eyes dropped lower. His stomach twisted. Olivia was pregnant. The realization hit him like a wave. She rested one hand protectively against the gentle curve beneath her elegant navy dress as the hostess greeted her. Ethan stared, unable to look away. But the shock wasn't over. A tall man entered behind her. Broad-shouldered. Distinguished. Confident. Nathan Reed. CEO of Reed Global Holdings. One of the most powerful executives in America. Nathan placed a hand lightly against Olivia's back as they followed the hostess deeper into the restaurant. The gesture was simple. Natural. Familiar. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Across the table, Sophia noticed the color draining from his face. "Ethan?" she asked. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. 20 feet away, Nathan pulled out a chair for Olivia before taking the seat beside her. They exchanged a smile. A private smile. The kind shared by two people who understood each other without speaking. Ethan's grip slipped. The crystal glass struck the table, tipping sideways. Red wine spilled across the white linen cloth. Several nearby guests turned to look. Ethan barely noticed. His eyes remained locked on Olivia. She laughed softly at something Nathan said. Then, as if sensing his stare, she turned. Their eyes met across the crowded dining room. Olivia froze. Ethan froze. And in that single moment, 7 years of buried memories came crashing back to life. Olivia was the first to look away. The moment lasted no more than 2 seconds, yet it felt long enough to reopen wounds Ethan had spent 7 years trying to bury. She turned back toward Nathan and forced a small smile, but Ethan noticed the change immediately. Her shoulders had stiffened. Her hand tightened around the edge of the table. She had seen him. She remembered him. And somehow that hurt more than if she had ignored him completely. The rest of dinner became a blur. Sophia continued talking, but Ethan could not have repeated a single word she said. His eyes kept drifting across the room. Every glance felt like a punishment. Nathan poured sparkling water into Olivia's glass. He adjusted her chair when she shifted uncomfortably. He listened when she spoke. The simple acts carried a familiarity that twisted something deep inside Ethan. By the time the check arrived, he could not take it anymore. Olivia and Nathan stood first. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated as he watched them prepare to leave. For one reckless second he considered walking over. Asking questions. Demanding answers he had no right to demand. But before he could move, Nathan placed a protective hand near Olivia's shoulder and guided her toward the exit. They disappeared through the restaurant doors and into the Manhattan night. Ethan remained frozen in his seat. Back at his penthouse overlooking Central Park, the city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. Usually the view calmed him. Tonight it felt empty. He loosened his tie and walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, yellow taxis crawled through the streets like streams of light. Somewhere out there was Olivia. Pregnant. Happy, perhaps. Building a life that clearly no longer included him. Ethan closed his eyes. Unfortunately, memories came immediately. He remembered a small apartment in Brooklyn. The smell of coffee every Saturday morning. Olivia sitting cross-legged on the couch, laughing at something he had said. Back then he had no private jets. No billion-dollar acquisitions. No magazine covers. He was simply a young entrepreneur with impossible dreams and a woman who believed in him before anyone else did. His phone buzzed. Sophia. Ethan stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. A moment later a text appeared. Are you okay? You seemed distracted tonight. He set the phone down without replying. His attention drifted toward an old wooden box hidden in a bookshelf across the room. He had not opened it in years. Slowly he walked over and lifted the lid. Inside were fragments of a life he had convinced himself no longer mattered. Concert tickets. Photographs. Birthday cards. And at the very bottom rested a silver necklace with a tiny star charm attached to it. Olivia's favorite necklace. Ethan picked it up carefully. The metal felt cold against his palm. He remembered the day he gave it to her. She had smiled and said, "Whenever life gets complicated, this will remind me where home is." Ethan swallowed hard. 7 years. 7 years of success, wealth, and achievement. Yet seeing Olivia for less than a minute had shattered the illusion that he had moved on. Across the city, Olivia stood by the window of her apartment, one hand resting gently against her stomach. The skyline glowed beyond the glass. Behind her, Nathan placed a folder on the dining table. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally Nathan broke the silence. He looked toward her with quiet concern. He saw you tonight, didn't he? Olivia lowered her eyes and nodded. Then she whispered the one name she had spent 7 years trying not to say. Ethan. Olivia did not sleep much that night. Long after Nathan had gone home, she remained awake in her apartment, sitting beside the living room window as the lights of Manhattan shimmered across the darkness. One hand rested gently against her stomach while countless thoughts moved through her mind. She had spent years preparing herself for many possibilities. She had imagined seeing Ethan again at a business event, on a magazine cover, even walking past him on a crowded street. Yet nothing had prepared her for the shock of seeing him only a few yards away. The next morning sunlight poured through the curtains. Olivia forced herself to focus on her routine. Her doctor had insisted that reducing stress was important, especially now. She made breakfast, answered emails, and reviewed documents for the nonprofit foundation she managed with Nathan's support. From the outside her life appeared stable and successful. In many ways it was. But there were still moments when old memories slipped through the cracks. Around 10 o'clock her phone rang. Nathan. She smiled faintly before answering. Good morning, she said. How are you feeling? Nathan asked. Better than last night. That is not a real answer. Olivia laughed softly. Nathan had always been able to read through her defenses. I am fine, she said. Just surprised. Nathan paused. Do you think he recognized me? Olivia looked out the window. Everyone recognizes Nathan Reed. That is not what I meant. She knew exactly what he meant. Did Ethan recognize the role Nathan played in her life? Did he assume the baby belonged to him? Did he think they were married? The truth was almost ironic. Nathan was not her husband. He was not her boyfriend. He was not even a former romantic interest. He was simply the person who had shown up when her world had fallen apart years ago. A friend. A protector. Someone who had kept his promises. After ending the call, Olivia headed downtown for a meeting at the Foundation's community center. The building occupied 3 renovated floors overlooking the Hudson River. Volunteers moved through the halls carrying supplies for upcoming family programs. Children laughed in nearby classrooms. The energy always lifted her spirits. As she greeted staff members and reviewed schedules, she felt the tension from the previous evening slowly fade. Then one of the receptionists approached her. "Olivia, there is something you should probably see." The young woman handed over a tablet displaying a business news article. At the top was a recent photograph of Ethan Blackwood leaving a corporate event. Olivia froze. Even after 7 years, seeing his face still affected her more than she wanted to admit. The article discussed a major acquisition worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Ethan looked confident. Powerful. Untouchable. Yet Olivia found herself studying his eyes instead. For reasons she could not explain, he looked tired. Before she could stop herself, she remembered the ambitious young man who once shared takeout dinners with her on a tiny apartment floor. The man who used to dream out loud about changing the world. The man she had once loved with everything she had. Olivia quickly closed the article and handed the tablet back. But the uneasy feeling remained. Because deep down she knew something had changed the moment their eyes met in that restaurant. And somewhere across the city, she had a feeling Ethan Blackwood was thinking about her too. 3 days passed, and Ethan told himself he should let it go. He should focus on the merger currently dominating his schedule. He should stop thinking about a woman he had not spoken to in 7 years. But every time he sat down at a conference table, every time he signed another contract, his mind drifted back to Olivia. By Friday morning, curiosity had turned into obsession. Ethan stood inside his office on the top floor of Blackwood Tower, staring at the skyline while his longtime assistant, Lauren Mitchell, reviewed his calendar. "You have the board meeting at 11, the investor luncheon at 1, and the charity gala planning session at 4, she said. Ethan barely heard her. "Lauren." "Yes?" "I need information on someone." She paused. "Business related?" Ethan hesitated. "Not exactly." 10 minutes later, Lauren returned carrying a thin folder. Ethan opened it immediately. The first page contained public information about Olivia Carter, Executive Director of the Harbor Light Foundation. Community development projects. Family support programs. Educational grants. Ethan frowned. The information only raised more questions. Olivia had built an impressive career. Yet what truly captured his attention was another name appearing repeatedly throughout the documents. Nathan Reed. Major donor. Board chairman. Strategic partner. The 2 names appeared together almost everywhere. Ethan flipped through photographs from public events. There they were at fundraising dinners. Charity auctions. Community center openings. In every image Nathan stood close to Olivia. Comfortable. Familiar. Protective. Ethan felt an uncomfortable knot tighten in his chest. Later that afternoon, a black sedan pulled to the curb across from Harbor Light Foundation's headquarters. Ethan remained inside the vehicle, feeling ridiculous for being there. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation, yet watching one building in trance suddenly made him nervous. Employees streamed in and out throughout the day. Then, shortly after 3 o'clock, Olivia appeared. Ethan's breath caught instantly. She looked relaxed, smiling as she exited the building carrying several folders. Moments later another familiar figure emerged behind her. Nathan. The two walked together toward the parking lot. Nathan reached for the stack of folders in Olivia's arms before she could protest. She laughed and surrendered them. The simple exchange felt painfully natural. Ethan watched as Nathan opened a vehicle door for her. Then he noticed something else. A small shopping bag rested in Nathan's hand. As Olivia climbed into the passenger seat, Nathan handed it to her. Curious, Ethan leaned forward. Through the windshield he caught a glimpse of the store logo printed on the side. Little Star's Baby Boutique. Ethan felt as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. Baby clothes. Nathan had bought baby clothes. For Olivia. His grip tightened around the seat. Every piece of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. The dinners. The foundation. The support. The pregnancy. The baby gifts. Nathan Reed was not simply part of Olivia's life. He appeared to be building a family with her. As the car disappeared into traffic, Ethan remained frozen in place. For the first time since seeing Olivia again, a terrible possibility settled into his mind. Maybe he was not mourning a second chance. Maybe he was mourning a future that already belonged to someone else. That night Ethan found himself standing alone in front of the same bookshelf again. The silver star necklace remained in his hand as memories he had spent years avoiding finally resurfaced. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he was no longer a billionaire standing inside a luxury penthouse. He was 29 years old again, sitting on the worn couch of a small Brooklyn apartment while Olivia curled up beside him, laughing over takeout containers balanced on their knees. Back then everything had felt simple. They were not rich. They were not powerful. But they had each other. Ethan remembered how Olivia used to believe in his ideas before anyone else did. When investors rejected him, she encouraged him. When his first company nearly failed, she worked extra hours to help cover rent. She celebrated every small victory as though it were the biggest achievement in the world. Those memories should have brought comfort. Instead, they only made the present hurt more. Because eventually everything changed. As Ethan's company began attracting attention, new people entered his life. Investors. Executives. Wealthy business partners. His schedule became packed with meetings and travel. The higher he climbed, the more pressure surrounded him. One particular evening remained painfully clear in his memory. He had returned from a business trip expecting to surprise Olivia. Instead, he arrived outside a restaurant and saw her sitting across from another man. They appeared deep in conversation. At one point the man reached across the table and touched her hand. Ethan remembered the feeling that exploded inside his chest. Shock. Confusion. Betrayal. He never walked inside. He never asked questions. Instead he left. Over the following weeks more misunderstandings followed. Anonymous photographs appeared. Rumors reached him through people he barely trusted. Every piece seemed to confirm the same story. Olivia was moving on. Looking back now, Ethan could hardly believe how easily he had accepted it. He had trusted strangers more than the woman he loved. A sharp knock on the office door interrupted his thoughts the following morning. Lauren entered carrying several documents. "You have a meeting in 15 minutes, she reminded him. Ethan nodded absent-mindedly. Then he asked a question that surprised even himself. "Lauren, have you ever looked back at a decision and realized you were completely wrong?" She blinked. "That depends on the decision." Ethan stared out the window. "What if that decision cost you everything?" Lauren studied him for a moment. "Then the question is whether you are brave enough to find out the truth." Hours later, across the city, Olivia sat with Nathan inside a quiet conference room at the foundation. Several project reports covered the table between them. Yet neither seemed focused on work. Nathan watched her carefully. "You have been distracted all morning." Olivia sighed. "Maybe seeing him brought back more memories than I expected." Nathan nodded slowly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" Olivia looked down at her hands. For several seconds she said nothing. Then a sad smile appeared on her face. "I stopped asking that question a long time ago. Nathan wanted to say more, but he remained silent. Because unlike Ethan, Nathan knew something important. He knew the full story of what happened 7 years ago. He knew the truth behind the misunderstandings. And most importantly, he knew a secret that would change everything once it finally came to light. The following week should have been one of the busiest periods of Ethan's year. A major acquisition was entering its final stage, investors were demanding updates, and reporters seemed determined to follow his every move. Yet none of it held his attention for long. Every road somehow led back to Olivia. Worse, Sophia had started noticing. It began with small things. Ethan canceling dinner plans. Ethan staring through conversations. Ethan checking his phone whenever a notification appeared. By Thursday evening her patience finally snapped. They were seated in a private lounge overlooking the East River when Sophia set down her glass and folded her arms. "Who is she?" Ethan looked up. "What? Do not insult my intelligence." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes were sharp. Something changed after that night at the restaurant. Ethan remained silent. Sophia leaned forward. "You have barely looked at me since then." For several seconds neither spoke. Finally Ethan exhaled. "Her name is Olivia." Sophia laughed once, though there was no humor in it. "The woman from the restaurant." It was not a question. Ethan nodded. Sophia looked away toward the river. "So she is the one." Ethan frowned. "The one what?" "The one you never got over." The words landed harder than he expected because they were true. Sophia stood. "I spent 2 years convincing myself I could compete with a memory." She shook her head sadly. "I should have known better." Before Ethan could respond, she walked away. For the first time he did not chase after her. Across Manhattan, Olivia was attending a fundraising reception hosted by Harbor Light Foundation. The event occupied the rooftop garden of a historic hotel. Strings of warm lights glowed overhead while donors and volunteers mingled among flower displays and city views. Nathan remained nearby throughout the evening, helping greet guests and support the foundation's mission. Everything appeared perfect. Then Olivia suddenly felt dizzy. The laughter around her blurred. The lights seemed brighter than before. She reached for the edge of a nearby table. Nathan noticed instantly. "Olivia?" She forced a smile. "I am fine." But her knees weakened. Within seconds Nathan was beside her, steadying her gently and guiding her toward a chair. Concern spread across the faces of nearby guests. Nathan immediately called for water and contacted her doctor. The moment lasted less than a minute, yet someone else witnessed every second. Standing near the entrance was Ethan. He had arrived unexpectedly after learning about the fundraiser through a business contact. The sight before him crushed whatever hope remained. Nathan knelt beside Olivia, speaking softly while holding her hand. Olivia smiled reassuringly at him. To everyone watching, they looked exactly like a devoted couple preparing for parenthood together. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He turned away before either of them could notice him. As he left the rooftop, one thought echoed endlessly through his mind. Nathan Reed was not simply part of Olivia's life. He was the man standing beside her when she needed someone most. And Ethan feared he had arrived 7 years too late to change that. The fundraiser ended earlier than expected. Olivia insisted she was feeling much better, but Nathan still drove her home himself. The city lights reflected across the windshield as traffic moved slowly through Manhattan. For several minutes neither of them spoke. Finally Olivia looked out the passenger window and smiled faintly. "You worry too much." Nathan laughed. "That is not what my board of directors says." "Your board of directors is afraid of you." "And you are not?" Olivia shook her head. "Never." Nathan's smile faded slightly. "That is probably why you are one of the few people I trust completely." Olivia glanced at him. There was sincerity in his voice, the same sincerity that had carried them through years of friendship. When they arrived at her apartment building, Nathan walked her to the entrance. Before leaving, he paused. "There is something I need to ask." Olivia already knew where the conversation was heading. "Nathan? He showed up tonight." She lowered her eyes. "I know. And sooner or later he is going to start asking questions." Olivia's hand instinctively rested against her stomach. Nathan watched the gesture carefully. "How much longer are you planning to keep the truth from him?" The question lingered between them. Olivia took a slow breath. "As long as necessary." Nathan looked disappointed but not surprised. "You still think you are protecting everyone?" "No," she said quietly. "I am protecting myself." Nathan understood. More than anyone, he understood. 7 years earlier he had witnessed the aftermath of Ethan's disappearance. He had seen the heartbreak. The loneliness. The months Olivia spent trying to rebuild a life that had collapsed overnight. He had also seen something else. The determination that followed. Olivia had never allowed bitterness to define her. Instead she focused on creating a future. A future that now included the child she already loved more than anything. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in his office long after sunset. Most employees had gone home hours earlier. The lights of Blackwood Tower illuminated the empty floor while rain tapped softly against the windows. A folder lay open on his desk. Inside were articles, photographs, and public records connected to Olivia and Nathan. Ethan studied them one more time. Every image told the same story. They attended events together. Led projects together. Appeared at fundraisers together. Supported each other constantly. Any reasonable person would assume they were building a life together. Yet something continued to bother him. It was not logic. It was instinct. Olivia had looked surprised when she saw him in the restaurant. Not angry. Not indifferent. Surprised. And when their eyes met, Ethan had seen something he could not forget. Pain. The same pain he carried himself. His phone suddenly buzzed. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. "Sorry to call this late," she said. "But I found something unusual." Ethan straightened immediately. "What is it?" "You asked me to look deeper into Harbor Light Foundation." "And?" A brief pause followed. "Nathan Reed joined the foundation board 7 years ago." Ethan frowned. "So?" Lauren continued carefully. "The interesting part is why. According to older records, he joined immediately after a private recommendation from Olivia Carter." Ethan stared at the rain beyond the glass. 7 years ago. The exact year everything fell apart. A strange feeling settled over him. For the first time, he began to wonder if the story he had been telling himself was missing an important chapter. 2 days later, answers arrived from a direction Ethan never expected. Lauren stepped into his office carrying a thicker folder than usual. Her expression alone told him this was different. "You asked me to keep digging," she said. "I found something." Ethan motioned for her to continue. Lauren placed several documents on the desk. Nathan Reed was not just recommended by Olivia 7 years ago. He became involved with Harbor Light Foundation after a specific event. Ethan opened the first page. It contained an article from years earlier. A charity fundraiser. A community outreach project. A photograph accompanied the story. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Standing beside a younger Olivia was a smiling woman he did not recognize. The caption identified her as Emma Reed, Nathan's younger sister. Ethan looked up. "What does this have to do with Olivia?" Lauren hesitated. "Everything." She slid another document forward. This one was an obituary. Emma Reed had passed away 7 years earlier after a long illness. Ethan felt a strange chill. Lauren continued. According to multiple sources, Olivia volunteered at a support center where Emma received assistance during her treatment. They became close friends. Ethan stared silently at the page. And Nathan? After Emma passed away, Nathan became involved with the organizations she cared about. Harbor Light Foundation was one of them. Ethan leaned back slowly. Suddenly pieces began shifting into place. Not fitting together yet, but moving. That evening, across town, Olivia sat in a quiet conference room reviewing plans for a new family outreach program. Nathan entered carrying 2 cups of tea. He placed one beside her and took the seat across the table. For several moments neither spoke. Finally Nathan smiled faintly. "You know what Emma used to say about you?" Olivia looked up. "That sounds dangerous." Nathan laughed softly. "She said you were incapable of giving up on people." The smile on Olivia's face faded into something more emotional. Emma Reed had been one of her closest friends. Even now, years later, thinking about her brought both sadness and gratitude. "She always believed the best about everyone," Olivia said quietly. Nathan nodded. "Even when they did not deserve it." Silence settled over the room. Then Nathan reached into his briefcase and removed an old photograph. It showed Emma standing between them at a community fundraiser many years ago. All 3 were smiling. Olivia studied the image carefully. A lifetime seemed to separate that version of herself from the woman she had become. Nathan's voice softened. "The only reason I met you was because of Emma." Olivia looked at him. "I know. And the only reason I stayed was because I promised her I would help if you ever needed anything." Emotion flickered across Olivia's face. Nathan had kept that promise longer than anyone could have expected. Not as a husband. Not as a boyfriend. Simply as a loyal friend honoring the memory of someone they both loved. Later that night, Ethan sat alone reviewing the information Lauren had uncovered. The more he read, the less his original assumptions made sense. Nathan and Olivia shared years of history. But not the kind Ethan had imagined. For the first time since seeing them together, a possibility entered his mind that changed everything. What if Nathan Reed was not the father of Olivia's child? The question refused to leave Ethan's mind. For days he replayed every interaction he had witnessed between Olivia and Nathan, searching for signs he might have missed. The more he examined the evidence, the less certain he became. Nathan was protective, yes. Loyal, absolutely. But there was something missing from the picture Ethan had created in his head. One Saturday morning, Ethan attended a business conference at a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The event gathered executives from across the country, and under normal circumstances he would have been focused on networking and negotiations. Instead, his attention drifted the moment he noticed a familiar name listed among the afternoon speakers. Nathan Reed. Hours later, Ethan found himself standing near the back of a crowded ballroom while Nathan delivered a presentation about corporate philanthropy. The audience listened attentively as Nathan discussed community investment, education programs, and family support initiatives. Then Nathan said something that caught Ethan completely off guard. "The strongest families are not always the ones connected by blood," Nathan said. "Sometimes they are built by people who choose to show up when life becomes difficult." The statement seemed ordinary to everyone else. To Ethan, it felt personal. After the presentation ended, guests gathered for a reception. Ethan remained partially hidden among the crowd as Nathan spoke with donors and business leaders. Then a woman approached Nathan. She appeared to be in her 60s and greeted him warmly. Ethan could not hear the beginning of their conversation, but one sentence reached him clearly. "Emma would be proud of how you have taken care of Olivia all these years." Nathan smiled softly. "I only kept a promise." Ethan froze. A promise. Not a marriage. Not a relationship. A promise. Before he could process the implication, the woman continued. "And now with the baby coming, Olivia is lucky to have someone she can trust." Nathan's expression became thoughtful. "She deserves far more than that." The conversation ended as other guests approached, but the damage was done. Ethan's assumptions were beginning to crack. That evening, Nathan visited Olivia's apartment carrying groceries and several folders related to foundation projects. Olivia laughed when she saw the number of bags. "You realize I am pregnant, not incapable." Nathan set the bags on the kitchen counter. "Your doctor said you should rest more." "My doctor also said you worry too much." Nathan smiled, but his expression soon grew serious. "There is something we need to discuss." Olivia immediately recognized the tone in his voice. "Ethan." Nathan nodded. "He's getting closer to the truth." Olivia lowered herself into a chair and stared out the window. The city skyline glowed beneath the setting sun. "Maybe." Nathan sat across from her. "If he discovers everything on his own, it could become much more painful." Olivia looked down at her hands. For years she had convinced herself that the past belonged in the past. Yet now the walls protecting those memories were beginning to crumble. Nathan studied her quietly before asking the question he had avoided for months. "If he learns the truth, are you prepared for what comes next?" Olivia closed her eyes for a moment. Then she placed a hand gently against her stomach and whispered, "I do not know." Unseen by either of them, the answer to that question was already moving closer than they realized. The truth began revealing itself through the smallest details. On Monday morning, Ethan arrived at his office before sunrise, unable to shake the feeling that he had been looking at the wrong puzzle for weeks. Instead of focusing on contracts and acquisitions, he opened the old folder containing every piece of information he had gathered about Olivia. For the first time, he stopped looking for evidence that connected her to Nathan. Instead, he looked for clues connected to himself. Hours passed. Then one detail caught his attention. A photograph from a recent charity event included a brief caption mentioning Olivia's expected due date. Ethan stared at the date. Something about it felt familiar. He grabbed a notepad and began calculating backwards. At first he thought he had made a mistake. Then he calculated again. And again. Each time he reached the same conclusion. The timeline pointed directly toward the period shortly before their paths crossed again. A cold sensation traveled through his chest. Ethan leaned back slowly, staring at the numbers. It could be a coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. Yet the possibility refused to disappear. For the first time, a question entered his mind that he had never dared ask. What if the child had nothing to do with Nathan Reed? Across Manhattan, Olivia sat inside her doctor's office for a routine appointment. The steady rhythm of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, bringing a smile to her face despite the anxiety she had been carrying for weeks. Her doctor reviewed several charts before offering reassurance. "Everything looks excellent," she said. "You are taking good care of yourself." Olivia thanked her and gathered her things. As she exited the building, she was surprised to find Nathan waiting outside. "You did not have to come," she said. Nathan shrugged. "I was nearby." Olivia laughed. "That is not true." Nathan smiled. "Fine. I wanted to make sure everything went well." As they walked toward the car, neither noticed a black sedan parked half a block away. Ethan sat behind the wheel, watching from a distance. He saw Nathan take the medical folder from Olivia's hands. He saw them talking comfortably. Yet something felt different now. The scene no longer looked like a husband caring for his wife. It looked like a friend carrying a burden he had chosen to share. That realization stayed with Ethan throughout the evening. Later that night, another unexpected piece of information arrived. Lauren called shortly after 9 o'clock. "I think I found something you need to hear," she said. Ethan immediately paid attention. "What is it?" "I spoke with someone who worked at Harbor Light Foundation years ago." A brief silence followed. According to her, Nathan was never romantically involved with Olivia. Ethan closed his eyes. His heart pounded. "Are you sure?" "Completely." Everyone there knew Nathan was honoring a promise connected to his sister. Ethan gripped the phone tighter. The final wall he had built around his assumptions was beginning to collapse. After ending the call, he walked toward the bookshelf and removed the silver star necklace once again. 7 years earlier he had convinced himself Olivia had chosen another life. Now, for the first time, he wondered whether she had spent those same years carrying a secret he should have known. And somewhere across the city, Olivia sat alone in her apartment, looking at an old photograph she rarely allowed herself to see. In it, a younger Ethan stood beside her, smiling without a care in the world. Slowly, she traced a finger across the image and whispered a truth she had never stopped carrying in her heart. "You should have been here from the beginning." The following afternoon, Ethan finally stopped running from the truth. For nearly 2 weeks he had watched from a distance, collecting fragments of a story that no longer made sense. The assumptions he had built were gone. The excuses he had used to justify the past had collapsed. All that remained were questions that demanded answers. By sunset he was standing outside Harbor Light Foundation. Employees filtered out of the building as the workday ended. Ethan waited near the entrance, his hands buried in the pockets of his coat. For the first time in years, the billionaire who negotiated with world leaders and corporate giants felt nervous. Then the glass doors opened. Nathan Reed stepped outside. Their eyes met instantly. Nathan did not appear surprised. In fact, he looked as though he had been expecting this moment. Ethan approached slowly. "We need to talk." Nathan studied him for several seconds before nodding. A few minutes later they sat across from each other inside a quiet conference room overlooking the Hudson River. The city glowed beyond the windows. Neither man spoke at first. Finally Ethan broke the silence. "You are not the father, are you?" Nathan leaned back in his chair. There was no anger in his expression. Only exhaustion. "No." The answer landed like a thunderclap. Even though Ethan had suspected it, hearing the words spoken aloud changed everything. Ethan swallowed hard. "Then why have you been there for her all these years?" Nathan looked toward the river before answering. "Because someone had to be." The room fell silent. Ethan lowered his gaze. Nathan continued. "Do you know what happened after you disappeared?" Ethan said nothing. "Do you know how many nights she spent wondering what she did wrong?" Nathan asked quietly. "Do you know how hard she worked to rebuild her life?" Every question felt heavier than the last. Ethan could not meet his eyes. Nathan's voice remained calm, but the disappointment behind it was impossible to miss. "The woman you abandoned spent 7 years carrying the consequences of a decision she never made." Ethan closed his eyes. The words struck deeper than any accusation. Because somewhere inside, he knew they were true. Nathan reached into his briefcase and removed a small envelope. He placed it on the table between them. Ethan stared at it. "What is this?" "Something Olivia never wanted you to see." Slowly, Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. His breath caught immediately. It was an ultrasound image. The date printed in the corner was from years earlier. 7 years earlier. His hands began to tremble. Beneath the image was a short handwritten note. The familiar handwriting made his chest tighten. "Ethan, I do not know if you will ever read this. But if you do, there is something you deserve to know." Ethan stopped reading. The room seemed to tilt around him. Every sound disappeared. Every thought vanished. Nathan watched quietly as the truth finally reached the man who should have known it from the beginning. And for the first time in 7 years, Ethan Blackwood understood exactly what he had lost. For a long time Ethan sat motionless inside the conference room, staring at the ultrasound photograph in his hands. The image was simple. Grainy. Ordinary to most people. Yet to him it felt more valuable than every company he owned. He read Olivia's unfinished note again and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. She had tried to tell him. She had wanted him to know. Somewhere between the lies, the misunderstandings, and his own pride, the truth had been lost. When Ethan finally looked up, Nathan was still sitting across from him. Neither man spoke for several moments. Then Ethan asked the only question that mattered. Does she hate me? Nathan considered the question carefully. If she hated you, your name would not still hurt when she says it. Ethan lowered his eyes. The answer carried both hope and heartbreak. What do I do now? Nathan leaned forward. You stop trying to win her back. Ethan frowned. Nathan continued. You earn the right to be part of her life again. There is a difference. Those words stayed with Ethan long after he left the building. Over the next several days he made a decision unlike any he had made in his business career. He stopped hiding. He stopped investigating from a distance. Instead he began correcting the damage he had ignored for years. He contacted several charitable programs that Harbor Light Foundation had struggled to fund and quietly covered the financial gaps without requesting publicity. He redirected resources toward family support initiatives Olivia had championed for years. Most importantly, he never attached his name to any of it. He did not want credit. He wanted accountability. Meanwhile, Olivia noticed strange changes occurring around the foundation. Projects that had been delayed suddenly received support. Waiting lists shortened. Families received assistance faster than expected. During a board meeting, one director smiled and announced that an anonymous donor had transformed the budget outlook for the entire year. Olivia listened quietly but felt a strange suspicion growing inside her. Later that evening she stood alone in the community center after most employees had gone home. Through the large windows she watched the city lights flicker against the dark river beyond. Footsteps approached behind her. Nathan entered carrying a folder. You know who it is, do not you? He asked gently. Olivia did not pretend to misunderstand. Ethan. Nathan nodded. Yes. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. A complicated mix of emotions rose inside her. Anger. Relief. Sadness. Hope. None of them felt simple anymore. Nathan handed her the folder. Inside were records showing every donation and project Ethan had funded over the past week. There were no press releases. No interviews. No public announcements. Just action. Olivia stared at the pages silently. Finally she whispered, "Why is he doing this?" Nathan smiled faintly. Because for the first time, he is trying to help without asking what he gets in return. Outside, the first snow of the season began falling over Manhattan. And for the first time in 7 years, the distance separating two broken hearts no longer felt impossible to cross. 3 weeks later, the first real snowstorm of the season covered Manhattan in white. Olivia stood near a hospital window watching snowflakes drift past the glass while nurses moved quietly through the hallway. Everything had happened faster than expected. The baby had decided to arrive early. Nathan sat nearby, reading updates on his phone while pretending not to worry. Olivia smiled. You know, pacing would probably make you feel better. Nathan looked up. I am not pacing. You paced for 20 minutes. Before he could respond, footsteps approached from the hallway. Both turned toward the door. Ethan stood there. Snow still clung to the shoulders of his dark coat. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Nathan stood and walked over to him. The two men exchanged a look that contained months of difficult conversations and hard truths. Nathan simply nodded. You should be here. Ethan swallowed hard. Are you sure? Nathan glanced toward Olivia. That is not my decision. Ethan slowly entered the room. Olivia watched him approach. The distance between them felt strangely familiar and impossibly long at the same time. 7 years of pain. 7 years of missed birthdays, missed conversations, missed chances. Yet now neither of them wanted to waste another moment pretending the past had not happened. Ethan stopped beside her bed. His voice was quiet. I know I do not deserve forgiveness. Olivia looked at him carefully. No. You do not. Ethan nodded. He had expected that answer. Then Olivia continued. But that does not mean people cannot change. Emotion filled Ethan's eyes. For several seconds he could not speak. Finally he reached into his coat pocket and removed something small. A silver necklace with a tiny star charm. Olivia froze the moment she saw it. "You kept it," she whispered. "Every day." Ethan placed it gently in her hand. "I should have trusted you. I should have listened. I should have been there." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she closed her fingers around the necklace. Before either could say more, a nurse entered with an excited smile. "I think someone is ready to meet their parents." Hours later, the room felt completely different. The storm continued outside while soft hospital lights illuminated the quiet space. Ethan sat in a chair holding a tiny newborn wrapped in a blanket. He stared down in amazement, unable to believe this moment was real. The baby's small hand curled around one of his fingers. Ethan laughed through tears. Olivia watched from the bed, her heart fuller than it had been in years. Across the room, Nathan stood near the window, smiling as though a promise had finally been fulfilled. Ethan looked up at him. "Thank you." Nathan shook his head. "Do not thank me. Just do not waste the second chance you have been given." Several months later, Harbor Light Foundation hosted a celebration for families helped through its programs. Children ran across the lawn while volunteers laughed and shared stories. Olivia stood beneath a string of lights with Ethan beside her and their baby sleeping peacefully in a stroller nearby. Ethan took her hand and smiled. Home was never a place, was it? Olivia looked at him and remembered the necklace, the years, the mistakes, and the journey back. Then she smiled. No. It was always the people who never stopped finding their way back to each other.